Yes, Lori, thank you. You might be wondering what I'm doing down here. Well, just to give you a little bit of background, I was born and raised in Vancouver, Washington. I've worked in Portland, I've worked in Oregon City, I've worked in Eugene. My son graduated from Oregon State, so this feels like home to me, and I'm super excited to be here, and I was super excited when I was asked if I would host my live version of my podcast today. So this is really fun, and what we wanted to talk about today, what we're going to focus on a little bit, are the changes that we've seen in the industry, because between the three of us, we have a lot of years of experience in this industry, and we have seen a lot of change. With the shortest amount of tenure in the industry being 27 years, we have seen it all, it feels like. So we're going to talk about what it was like to come up in this industry as a female. We're going to talk about the changes in the regulatory landscape, the compliance things that we have to deal with now that, I mean, when I first started, COBRA had just been passed, and believe me, that was a big deal. We all thought the whole industry was going to fall apart. Clearly, it did not. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about also how technology has changed not only our lives, but also the industry. So I'm really excited to kick it off, and so I'm just going to go, I was going to say right to left, but clearly that's not right, so we'll go left to right. And we're going to start with Stacy, and I would just like you to tell everybody a little bit about what it was like when you started and what you're doing now.
That's fair. Well, I was 19 when I started, so a very different time. I think I was employee number 284. That was on our badge when you hired. I was a clerk, which is probably about the lowest position you can start at Motiva. But it was above minimum wage, so I was really, really excited to work there. And within 3 months, I was promoted to, I think what would be the equivalent of a billing and eligibility specialist. That was really fun for me, so I did a lot of enrollment and billing, and just to kind of age a little bit on the technology as far as what was different. We actually would enroll off of a paper application, and you would walk that application over to another person in another department, and they would order the ID card. That was just, things weren't very integrated back then. We didn't all have phones at our desks. Email was new, and it was just a different time. Yeah. So things have really, I worked my way up. I was in operations for half my career. And when I talk about operations, and that's systems, like how claims pay, how the billing's set up, how enrollment rules are connected, how every single field in the systems that are used today, not just to adjudicate claims, but how they're used to produce EOBs, or how it's connected to your member portal. And going through a system conversion, I don't recommend that for anybody. I think once in a lifetime is one too many, but you really learn. And so when I migrated over to sales, I had a pretty strong operational background, and it's nice because I'm able to really sit across the table from the customer, and if I say we can do something, it's because I know our systems can support it, and I know the right people to really connect to help achieve the commitments that we're making as a company.
I love that. Sally, you want to tell us a little bit about what it was like when you started and your trajectory?
Sure, that was great. I loved hearing all that. I had a similar story. I started at 23, but I started for a little health plan called Select Care Health Plans in the Eugene market. And on my first day, I had to ask what HMO stood for. And I was like, this is the insurance thing, right? So I think I have insurance. I wasn't even really sure kind of how it worked. But I was hired directly into the sales department. And I was hired to work in the small group market, which is why it's still kind of near and dear to my heart. And I worked small group for quite some time. And while I didn't cover all the different areas of the organization, I was always asked to be a SME, and to this day I still am. So I find myself as a subject matter expert on a lot of topics. I'm attending a lot of meetings with people who, often many of them are just way smarter than me, so I just listen to them and try to figure out a way we can operationalize it in the sales department. But I've seen a lot of change. You talked about COBRA, and I thought about a lot of that over the years. I remember when HIPAA came out, we were all trying to get our arms around HIPAA and what did that mean, and confidentiality, and some of it just seemed like common sense, and the rest of it kind of seemed like French. And then, the ACA hit, and I've watched technology over the years. But when I was about 5 years in with Select Care, they were bought by Providence Health Plan. And so I've been with Providence for the remainder of my career. And I've been, very happy there, and I love working in sales. So I do small group, large group, and most recently in the last few years, association health plan business.
That's awesome. I have a not too dissimilar story. I started out as an administrative assistant in a small insurance agency and decided that I really wanted to give my hand a try at sales. And so I went to my boss and I said, you know, I think I'd be really good at this. He sat behind his desk and he looked at me and he said, no, you'd be terrible. Nobody likes you. And I said, but I still think I do a good job at it. So he agreed to let me do it if I took a cut in pay and still did the admin work half the day. But you know what? That's what it took back then as a female to get opportunities. You did what it took. If I could get my foot in the door, I knew that I had an opportunity. So I took that opportunity, and about a year and a half later, he ended up selling me his shares in the agency, and I was there for a while before they went to sell. And again, thought as a female that a good place for me to be would be in a back room running an admin team. And I said, well, you know what, I think a good place for me to be would be running my own agency, so it's time for me to move on. So, you know, that was a pretty big deal. And, you know, I'm sitting here with you two, and I'm thinking about, again, if we dial it back 30 years, because that's about how long we've all been in the industry, providing that I was born, you know, a little bit different than I really was, but you would not have seen 3 women on a stage 30 years ago at any sort of industry conference, particularly in this industry. I think that that's a positive thing. I think one of the things that's a little bit sad is that 30 years ago, if you had a statewide health underwriters conference, or NABIP, whatever we want to call it now, this room would be double the size. I think that a lot of people are not as connected with our industry advocacy as it used to be, and I think that that's a little bit disappointing, and we need to do things to try to promote that and bring that support back, because there's so much that this organization provides to everybody in this room. Okay, so we know that when you guys came into the industry, that again, there wasn't a prevalence of females in leadership. Females were clerks and admin assistants and assistants of any sort. So how did you continue to rise up and to fight against any biases, or maybe there weren't biases in the on the insurance company side?
Do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. It's a really great question, because I have seen a lot of evolution with the roles and expansion for women in the industry. Working at Select Care, and when they interviewed me, it was really clear who was the sales department and who was the service department, and the service department was all women, and the sales department was all men. And then my job was created as a hybrid position, so I could sell service and provide mental clerical support. And there were 2 of us, and we were both women, so it was more because of the admin side. When we moved over to Providence and merged with Providence, I did see a big change just almost immediately there. It was a much different population. But I do recall that I had like 1 female agent that I worked with, 1 female producer in the Eugene market. You know, since then, I have probably, I'd say maybe a third. Yeah, maybe a third. And there's some of the smartest women I work with, and they've become my great friends over the years. But it's really changed in that I think it's brought a lot of advancement for women. A lot of areas where women can, you know, not just be the service rep or the administrative assistant, but we're out there in sales, and you know, maybe our sales style is a little different. I would say that, you know, when I think about my male counterparts, when I first went into sales years ago, mine was more on the model of service and being a credible resource for my producers. I would say I probably didn't golf as much, and I mean, I tried. I'm not good. At the very first time I went on Birkenstocks, everybody laughed at me. It didn't go well. But I enjoy them, and I really enjoy that I get to work with more women in this industry.
I love it. What was your experience like?
I too did not get the sports ball memo, so that was a hard adjustment coming into a sales area. But I think what it took really, I mean, you think about the healthcare industry, it's something around low 60%, maybe 65, around there are women. But you look at the leadership ranks, and the numbers don't really, or haven't for a while, represented the cross of what the actual employees are. And so for me, for my growth, it really did take more executive women coming in and recognizing the talent and mentoring the growth, because styles are different. And learning to navigate that was, took some work. So I feel like things have really changed, but they had to change at the top. And when they changed at the top, you really saw that kind of disseminate, through the ranks.
Well, you just teed up my next question perfectly, so thank you for that. So I'm curious because you mentioned mentorship. And I think that mentorship in this industry is critical because we don't know what we don't know. Whether that's about sales, whether that's about regulations, whether that's about products. Did you have any specific mentors and how did that mold your careers?
Oh yeah. So for me, I guess I'll start. I'll actually rotate. Okay, thank you. So mentorship for me it did take some women leaders to kind of pull me under their wing and be like, we're gonna help you with this. I think the first time was when I was promoted to a director, to senior vice presidents, women I really respected and admired. They said, there's pretty much, anything comes across operationally, you're gonna understand what to do. Like trust your judgment, your gut. But if you get stuck, come see us, we're not gonna let you fail. And it was having that support that really kind of opened me up to trust what I was wanting to do. This association is a form of mentorship.
I agree.
For me, again, I made that shift from operations into the sales world, and it was very different. So when I first sat down, someone was training me on, how would you respond to this email, Stacy? And I said, well, ID number K777289, claim has been adjusted. And they were like, oh honey, that's a real person. She's probably in the HR office crying because her chiropractic claim didn't pay. And I was like, whoa, that was a big eye-opening thing for me. So having this association so I could connect with people that did this for a living, people that actually were out there with customers, being able to meet with my employer groups, that's what really opened me up to a different way of looking at the work that we did. And so through this association, I was really able to kind of grow my leadership skills. So I've been on various board roles for probably the last, 12 years. Tim in the back got me involved. I think I showed up for, probably a broker meeting, and are you involved in OAHU? And I was like, what's that? And then I never really understood, was I NAHU, OAHU, or PAHU? It was very confusing times back then. It's a little simpler now. But I think we all have a role to play with mentorship. I think you can do it in these association type groups. You should do it too. Everybody in your office, you should be able to pick someone up and help them through it because we all need that.
Yeah, I actually had some really great women role models, but I actually had a lot of great male role models through my career. It was hard. I've seen mergers and acquisitions, and it was hard going through the merger between Select Care and Providence. But I did have a leader at Select Care who stayed. Her name was Susan Campbell. I worked with her for over 25 years, and she was a great role model for me. And now I continue to work for Strong Women. I think what really kind of changed it for me was when I moved over to Providence, our chief was Barb Christensen. And so I was immediately in an environment where there was, a very diverse group of people, lots of very intelligent men and women, and it was just so nice. And in Eugene, we didn't have an underwriter group, so I was part of, we had the insurance and financial advisors group.
Right.
So I go there and I really connected with a lot of the producers in the community, and a lot of them I feel like I grew up with, and some of them I felt like they were kind of like my father or my grandfatherly roles, and they'd really kind of guide me. I remember when ethics and law became requirements for RCE, and sitting with Dean Corchi from Pacific Benefit Consultants, talking to me about ethics, and I was like, why is this an important thing for our licensure? Of course, we all know this, and I learned so much from him. So I would say I've had great role models, very strong women in my career, but also some really great men who really helped me through it.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think mentors have to be male, female. They can be younger, they can be old, they can be younger than you. I had mentors that have benefited my life tremendously that are significantly younger because they knew more about a particular subject matter and helped me get a better grasp on it. So I think that's really important. I don't want to spend too much time about talking about females in this industry, but I do have one more question I think that's really important. And we as females, at least coming up, again going back, we had a different set of responsibilities, priorities, concerns than most men in the industry do. We were balancing our careers, we were balancing our home lives, we were balancing our marriages, we were balancing trying to move up the ladder, and there was a lot of controversial opinions about women that pursued their career versus those that stayed home and took care of their children. And trying to balance that all and to find a way to make that work, at least 30 years ago, was significantly different than it is now. And I would love to know how you guys managed those challenges.
Yeah, that's a great one. It's actually one I reflect back on a lot. I have a really strong relationship with my husband, so that's great, but he also had a really challenging job as a police sergeant, so our schedules conflicted quite often. I really had to lean, pretty heavily into family and friends, and I had to really be okay with, I think a lot of parents, not just moms, but dads too, have that guilt, of leaving your child in child care, or even the first day of school in kindergarten. So it was hard, but I think it was a lot of conversations, and then in the end, just kind of realizing that, when you see your child grow and become a good adult, knowing that some of those experiences were important for them too, so that they could be around other people and be well-rounded individuals in society. So I think that helped me a lot along the way, was just leaning into people and leaning on my husband and having a good partner, and then making sure that my children were taken care of and seeing them grow into great people.
I cried a lot. I'm not gonna say I did.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it is hard, and it's hard today. It was hard then, balancing family and work, and you want to, come across as like having a hustle so that you can continue with your career. And sometimes I think we feel like that hustle can come at the expense of the family. And the reality is, being in a work environment that really promotes family and what's important. And at the end of the day, we're all working to support our family, and that's what it's about. So it was hard. So the drop-off days where the kids were good, like no big deal. They're bad and they're crying, and you're like, I'm the worst mother in the world. And I think there was also a lot of that kind of mom shaming, a little bit more. Maybe it happens a little bit today. I'll have to ask some of the new moms that work for me now. The schedules are better now. I feel like they're a lot more flexible. So you're able to take some time off for an important school event. Those things are so critically important. And I think I had to learn to let go of some things. One, for me to be the best me, sometimes I needed to work. I'm not good at the house all day. I wish I was. I'm not today to do that. Some people can, and I think it's a really difficult and hard job. I learned to, I don't have to clean my house. I can hire someone to do that. As my career was changing and hiring things out. And it's okay to have a messy house too. So I had to let go of a lot to be okay with what was the most important thing. My kids healthy, they're doing what they need to do, and I'm doing my best job at work.
Yeah, I love that. I know personally, I have one child, an adult son, and we've often talked about this, and he's like, Mom, you would have ruined me if you stayed home. Because I would not have been a good stay-at-home mom. I like you, I admire people that can do it. I was not cut out for that. I was much better if the time that I was with him, they talk about quality time, and sometimes they say that doesn't count. For me, it counted, because I would have had zero quality time otherwise. I know that because of you guys working for carriers, it's a little bit different from me on the agency standpoint, particularly owning my own agency. But when I started mine, I knew that I wanted to have that balance.
Yeah.
And so I was really thoughtful about how I put it together, and I wanted to be able to create the most balance that I could. Now it's never like this all the time. Sometimes it's like this and sometimes it's like this. But I wanted to create the most balance, and so that's been one of my core values of my agency as well, is that anybody I hire, I want them to have that same feeling, and I want them to feel supported in that way, and that we've always hired so that people don't have to work 50, 60 hours a week, even when we get to Q4. That's always been really important to me, so I appreciate how you guys have managed that as well. I didn't mention this at the beginning, and gosh, I hate to give away my age, but I mean, you can see it, so whatever. But When I first started, one of the very first things that happened within the first couple of years of me being in the industry was COBRA. The second thing that happened was the AIDS epidemic. So both of those things were huge in our industry. Anybody that was in the industry at that time remembers like how terrifying that was, and that we didn't know if the industry could sustain it, how were we gonna manage it. So I would be curious to know what you, in the course of your careers, what you think have been the biggest pivotal moments that have created the most change and or concern. Sally, I'll go to you first.
Okay.
All right.
Take care.
You know, I might need a drink after this one. I would say when I first started, I thought it was going to be Senate Bill 1076 that really kind of defined small group. And you know, like I mentioned, HIPAA was a lot to kind of get through. But I have to say the biggest thing probably was the ACA, and there was a lot of fear around it. And I think about it now. Oregon was already so well set up for the ACA, and I think we were kind of a poster child for how well we were taking care of preventive care and, you know, and proof of insurance for individual. I mean, we were set up with really good programs for people. So I think the ACA was probably the biggest thing that we had to grapple with, and I'm really glad that it came after the time when we were checking out cell phones and using VAX terminals for email, and actually all had laptops and stuff, so we could take the time to, in our downtime, like read it, figure out what we were going to do, how are we going to operationalize it. But while it was hard for us, what I really saw was it was really stressful for our producer partners, because they were advising the clients and trying to get their arms around, like, even the basic thing of the 90-day probationary period, it wouldn't exceed that, or children would be covered up to age 26. You know, immediately the actuaries were like, oh no, you know, what is this going to mean? And then, you know, years later we were able to look back on it and go, actually, that was a really good thing. That was a really great part of the ACA. So I want to say it's probably the ACA, and getting our hands around it and be able to advise and help people through that and make them realize that it really wasn't that scary. It's got some good parts to it. Some parts that we're still working on.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I would agree. I mean, I feel like the Affordable Care Act was huge. And if you ever get a chance, if you're kind of a nerd like I am, America's Bitter Pill, it's a great book. It takes you through Obama winning the Democratic nomination all the way through the first year of the Affordable Care Act going into place, and just all the background deals and the pages and pages of legislation. And it's fun to read if you lived it. You're like, I was there, I remember that. Keep your plan, and you're like, what? Okay, sure. It was hard. Everything changed all the time, and you know, there wasn't a lot of guidance, and it was a lot of interpretation, and things would come out and we'd all scramble. So I think that what's interesting is something like my mom said this, I don't know, like 20 years ago. Something was bothering me, probably an election, because I get all fired up about those. But she said, here's the thing, this stuff is very cyclical. And that's where, you know, you just have to be informed. You've got to learn about things that happened in the past so that you prevent it for the future. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is the Affordable Care Act, it was huge, we're still kind of going through it, and it was probably the biggest thing in my career. But it's like you look at the No Surprises Act and the Consolidated Appropriations Act that's going on right now, it's just as difficult. Yeah. Things are still vague and weird and changing all the time, and you're pivoting and going back and forth. And I think what it just means is that you kind of have to be on your toes. There's always going to be new legislation, and again, that's why I am so passionate about legislation, is because it really does influence the industries that we're in. So being a part of like understanding what's going on, how you can be a part of it with your legislators, understand what's going on in DC. Those things are critical because it impacts our day to day.
Yeah, let's not forget COVID.
Well, I mean,
we all had to kind of pivot with COVID, so I kind of forget about that, but that was just keep going. I know, but that was a whole nother layer.
It was.
You know, people were, and now we have paid Oregon leave.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we already had it for a while. So I think that those are really good points, but I think what's really interesting also is the rapid pace at which the legislation is coming at us right now. And the other thing that I can say about that is make sure that you understand not only what's been passed, but what is being floated as well, because you're only hearing the sound bites And it's the clauses, it's the hidden clauses that get us every time. It's the unintended consequences of a lot of this legislation that on the surface sounds good, but you have to think it all the way through and make sure that you have a good understanding of it. Whether you like it or not, you need to understand it so that you can most appropriately respond to it and help your customer base, your brokers, your members, whomever it is that you serve directly. I think that is our responsibility, being in this industry, is to be well informed about that. So, okay, so it's not only compliance that's changed. We did bring it up in the very beginning. Let's even talk about technology a little bit. And again, I remember getting the first computer in my office at the previous agency that I worked at. It was probably about as big as that table, and it had one of the little floppy disks in it. And everybody got a time. You had a time slot you could use the computer with your own little floppy disk. Because prior to that, we did proposals on the typewriter. That was not fun. Let me tell you that right now, because guess what happened if you made a mistake?
There's no text.
You had to do it over. You had to do it over again. So much of technology has made our lives so much better. But I also remember there used to be, and you guys might remember this as well, but there used to be courier services from the agencies to the carriers, and they would deliver apps and contracts back and forth, and now it's it's delivered to us in the blink of an eye. So what would you say, from a technology standpoint, has created the most benefit for the industry, or for you personally? Which else?
No, okay, sorry, not me personally. I mean, I think the internet. I mean, honestly, we had those Encyclopedia Britannicas. You work to write a paper. I mean, that was some hard times. So everything's on the internet now, which is good and bad. But I think that's one of the things that's probably exploded how we can do our jobs, and access to the information that you can get to, the research that you can do on a prospect that you're working on. It's pretty astronomical as far as what's available.
Yeah, I'll agree with the internet, and I think that's true. I also think, because I work in Eugene, what's been really important to me is being able to connect with my agents, my coworkers, the people I work with. And the technology wasn't as great before the pandemic. It was really. And so, it really kind of gave me the tools I needed to better do my job. It's a pretty big geography. And I can instant message now. I mean, sometimes that's a little bit of a burden because it's popping up all the time. But instant message even wasn't even that big of a thing with Skype and things like that just 5-6 years ago. So I talked about checking out that we had the brick phones that I'm sure we probably all have some level of radiation from that. But we used to check out cell phones, and now we all have our phones and tablets. But I think I want to say it's probably been the virtual tools so that we could communicate with people, not just through the pandemic. I think it kind of changed the way we do business, and going paperless. Yeah, I mean, I'm so thankful I got rid of my file cabinet the year before the pandemic just because I thought I'm going to try this. It was the best thing I did. So I think that's probably been the best part is the tools.
Yeah, I think the downside of that though is that, because it's cool because everything's right there at your fingertips instantly, and if you don't respond to me, I'm what's going on? Are you okay? Right. Yeah. But it's so hard to turn it off. It's I think that's the challenge, and it's something that I really encourage my own team, and I try to walk the talk. It's hard because everything's right there. Is that, do you really need to send your email at 10 o'clock at night? If I do that, then everybody thinks, well, okay, Stacy's in that role. That's the kind of hustle that is needed to go into a higher level, and it's not. And we kind of need to break this kind of insanity to really do a good job. We need those breaks. We need the digital breaks. Turn it off. It's okay. Occasionally, there's a big thing that you need to do and do your push, but that shouldn't be your norm. And if it is, there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the workload. There's something wrong with how we're approaching work. I think we are our own worst enemy. We're the ones that are I have to get back to someone right now because it's so instant. But the reality, you can set boundaries. It's okay to say, I'm working on this, I'll get back to you tomorrow or the next day. So I feel like it's something we need to work on to create those boundaries and acceptable things, because otherwise there's burnout. You have a hard time balancing family, the things that we talked about earlier. And all the things that are important. I mean, we all have lives outside of work.
Well, I agree with that, and I think that, that's probably going to be one of the next evolutions of technology, is that technology is going to allow us to better manage our own technology, our own accessibility, so I for one am all for that. Anybody in the audience have any other things that you would add as far as technology, as far as like what has had a really big impact on this industry or your ability to do your job?
Not requiring a paper check for a new group.
I think we can all agree with that one.
Yeah, I can tell you one that I'm really interested
True,
in. I think
right?
it's gonna be pretty pivotal for the industry, probably other industries too. And where insurance is usually a little slow to adopt though, is artificial intelligence. And we're starting to just dabble into it, different carriers in different ways. You can do it from, risk modeling perspectives that you want to put together. But at MODA, we're starting to use AI to listen to calls. And what it does is it tells you the caller's mood. So, and you can do a search by, let's say you, launched a plan called, Silver 5000, or Nimbus, the Nimbus 5000. You can actually do a search for Nimbus 5000, and the AI platform that we have will actually bring up the call temperament. So are they pleased, not pleased? And then you can actually pull all those calls and listen to them to hear what that is.
Listening to me, because it's always going to be not pleased.
But yeah, here's the problem. Here's the problem about that, is that we're actually a pretty polite culture in society. So when I call and maybe I'm not even happy with what my answer is, I'll be like, thank you, right at the end, and that kind of flags as a positive. And so you kind of have to, it's not perfect, but I think as we look at data risk stratification, there's customer service tools for sure. I think that AI is going to be, that's where I'm really excited to see how we can use that information, not replacing people. That's kind of not my thing, but I definitely think you can be informed using AI, and I'm pretty excited about that.
I was hoping somebody would bring that up, because I really do think that is our next big frontier.
Did you have a request for a question?
Yeah, always.
Okay, so on technology, I feel like there's a few of the insurers that have opened up portals for brokers to be able to manage members. And then there's still plenty that have not, so we're really wide scale on this capability. There is a huge difference in how this impacts me personally on a workload, and being able to, because we're in the front lines, we receive an application from an employee in the group. If I can key it in that same day I got it, everybody is happier. And I'm just giving that feedback because I would like it from other insurers to get on board with that.
No, I hear you. I can definitely say, it's nice for your question. Karen, good to see you. I would say for MODA, that's definitely on our digital roadmap. We have some broker tools, but they're not as robust as what you're talking about. And it's definitely on our roadmap to actually address and deliver in the next 12 to 18 months, which is great. I don't know about other carriers, but I feel like it's important for all of us.
Yes, and we're hearing a very consistent theme around that.
As a broker, I can put my hand in the air and say that's extraordinarily important to us, because most brokers' clients expect them to manage eligibility, and we want feeds set up, or we want access to portals, so that's a big deal. So I would agree with that. Any other questions around technology?
I would say having PDF fillable documents across the board for all carriers and adopting DocuSign.
Yeah,
It's good feedback.
I love it. And, and the other thing that's really nice too is not having to fill out paper applications anymore. Can we remember those days?
Well, I don't know how many people were on the phone call with yesterday with the Ease Employee Navigator acquisition. There's going to be a big push for carriers to get on board with, electronic everything and going through those portals.
Yeah.
Which I know a lot of people use those systems, and it does make life quite easy when you get a system that automatically, those employees go in, they sign up, and guess what? Enrollment automatically goes to all the carriers they have, boom, done. And there's some carriers out there, we still can't even get an ID card. It's like pulling teeth. We have one carrier, we can email them, I need an ID right away. And we have another, it's like, oh, you have to tell the employee, they have to call customer service, they have to give them this number, and then customer service is gonna tell them to create a portal, and then they can go in and get their ID card. I'm like, that is so not customer friendly.
You know, I think you bring up a really good point, and I'm curious about the opinion of the room about this issue. We love technology. I don't think there's probably a person in here that doesn't think technology is magnificent and doesn't think that technology improved significantly during COVID. But I've also seen a decline in actual customer service as a result of technology, and that we want to tell people, oh, you can do that yourself. And it's great that they can do that themselves, but I think that sometimes there is a need to talk to a real person. And I know as carriers, I'm sure that you do that. But I'm just curious across the board in the room, do you feel that it's harder to get to talk to a real person than it used to be?
Yes.
So I think that's one of the areas that maybe as we get more efficient in other areas, and then maybe the AI takes on some of the things that were tedious tasks, that frees us up to provide that more real service. Was there a hand over here? Did I miss somebody? Okay.
And I would just add, I'm not sure so much that it's a technology issue, I mean, other than like it's a, kind of where we're at with maybe the pandemic. But in my mind, it could be more of a generational one, because I mean, I'm struggling with, you know, a lot of my team, they're, you know, super quick on, you know, they're texting me and IMing me and, you know, and they've been working with a broker or whatever, and it's like 17 emails in, and you're like, just pick up the phone. But it's just, it's a little bit of the fear of like, you know, I've been behind this email wall for so long. Some of it's generational, some of it's like where they're at in their career. That's a good point. Scary, I think, for sometimes for people to pick up the phone. What if I don't know the answer? And so you kind of have to work.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Okay, so this is the gorilla in the room. How do we attract and retain younger and more diverse talent in this industry? Because we suck at it right now, excuse the language, but that's how I feel about it. What do we do? Thoughts?
Well, it's such an easy question.
Yeah.
No, I think it's hard. I mean, we really have to go after talent. So, I mean, you have to go after and find it. The reality is it's a little hard in Oregon. It's not the most diverse state in the US. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, that's not, you know, I'm not like jumping on that bandwagon right now, but we need to be hiring people of all the communities that we represent. And I think about this all the time in sales. I want people that can speak the languages of where we're trying to sell. I want people that look like my customers. I mean, you have to do that to do a really good job. And also to really represent the cross cultures, and to do that, you need a diverse team. I don't need a lot of me. Like, I know what I think. I want everybody at the table to be talking about what do they think. And when you have this different ages, and you have different cultures and background and education, that just leads to a stronger team. And so what I'm trying to encourage, like, we've got to go after and find that talent. We've really got to go out there and promote who we are. This is a great industry. It's a thriving industry, and it's one that you can do really well in. That you have to kind of get out there and really talk about it. And I think we just don't do that. I think we're kind of quiet, and they'll come to us, they'll find us on LinkedIn. I don't know, I think you kind of have to really put it out there.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a little bit of intimidation as well. For me, there's been a couple of things that I've done, and one thing is at a couple of the local colleges, I've actually volunteered to kind of talk about different topics, and you really get to connect with the younger community. And one of the things that I've seen is they kind of have a different perception of, you know, where they want to work or what they want to do. And a lot of them are like, I'd be okay with 3 part-time jobs, you know, I don't necessarily, but then I hear like, how do you get in an office setting? Like, you didn't just go to school for this, did you? And I was like, well, not a lot of people pick. It just kind of happens. But you know, that was my degree was in business, and I did start, you know, 30 years ago. But when I looked at a lot of those kids in the room, and I can call them kids now, which makes me feel so old. But they were like, how do you get into an office? How do you? And we don't have temp agencies like we did, you know, back in the day. It's a little more online. So I think you know, being able to be flexible with the type of jobs that, I mean, I remember 25 years ago, we were talking about job sharing. That was a brand new concept.
It was.
Like, we wanted an account manager that two people would like share that role, because these were a couple of moms that wanted to work kind of part-time but create a full role. And I was fortunate enough to work at a company that was like, yeah, we see what you're saying, and we'll go ahead and try out that model. I think we're gonna have to look at different types of models that appeal to kids or to the younger generation. And whether that's reaching them in their space, like how they learn, or what interests them, or, you know, getting them excited about insurance and explaining what a deductible and copay is. But I just think we have to find new ways to reach them where they are.
I was a junior achievement volunteer for about 20 years, and I had the opportunity to work in every single grade. And I think, like you, I've gone to college job fairs, I've done different things to, you know, let people know about it. But I think we need to reach people earlier. I think we need to reach them when they're in high school, because that's when they're really confused. What kind of, I mean, well, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things. We'll put confused at the top of the list, but they are confused because they're gonna go to college. They generally don't, I mean, they might say, okay, I'm gonna do this, but they don't really know why they wanna do it. It sounds kind of sort of interesting, but a lot of them, college is not the right path for them, so they're still not sure. There's plenty of jobs in this industry that do not require a college degree, and they will be fabulous in it. So I think that as an industry, that not just us, but this entire room has a responsibility to reach out to the younger generation, to reach out to different communities that might not be currently involved in this industry, and do everything we can to bring them in and help them feel comfortable with what we're doing. Because I think that that is going to be critical to the long-term success, because, you know, most of the time the average age in this room is not young.
It's fair.
I mean, fair. We know that it's not. It looks a little better in this room than some rooms I've been in, I will tell you that. So kudos to Oregon. OAHU, is that how we say it? I don't know. That thing. But if we don't have any other questions about what it was like to be a female, what the technology changes, the compliance changes. If any of you have ever watched my podcast, I always end it with what I call my 5 burning questions, and these 2 aren't getting out of here without them. So, we'll rotate. Are you ready?
Sure.
We'll start with you, Stacy.
All right.
In a nod to the name of my podcast, what is your absolute favorite food in the world and can you cook it?
Italian, easy. Can I cook it? Sure. Sure, I can cook it. Italian.
Any one dish?
I'm really into this like chicken lemon orzo right now, and I keep doing different variations. And I feel like what I've learned about this is that Italian cooking is pretty simple. It can be. You just have to use really quality ingredients.
Well, before we go to Sally, I will say that part of the reason I named my podcast Recipe for Success was because I was in the kitchen cooking one day, and I was starting to think about it, and I'm like, you know, there's always one key ingredient or technique that's really critical to the outcome of whatever it is that you're making, right? So Italian food is going to be high quality, fresh ingredients.
I mean, according to Stacy, I don't know if that's true, but like that's
true. Okay. But isn't the same thing true in business or life? There's always something that sets you apart and is key to your success.
Yeah.
So, back to food. Sally.
Well, like you, cooking is my passion. That's how I unwind, so it helps me a lot through the pandemic. Maybe not physically, but mentally. So I have to say my favorite thing to cook is something you don't cook. I make sushi all the time.
Oh, yes.
I like to make yogurt, but I'm big on sushi.
That's fun. That's amazing. Okay, so back to you, Sally. What's the one character trait you admire most in other people and why?
I have to say that the one character trait I admire the most is loyalty. And I just feel like, especially in the last 10 years, there's just been so much unrest, especially in the last 5 years. And to me, just loyalty is really important, and I am a person, I would say that's probably one of my best traits. I'm very loyal to my company, to people that are around me. So I would have to go with loyalty.
Okay, well, see, you already answered the second part of the question, which was what character trait in yourself are you most proud of and why? So,
I'll go with boys.
and maybe sushi. And maybe sushi. Okay, Stacy, you're on the seat.
I mean, the trait I admire the most is the one I feel like I wish I had more of, and that's courage. I feel like when I look at people who will talk about how their life and, oh, I moved my whole family to Philippines, and because they want to try something new, and I'm like, I would never do that. I don't know if I would move to another city. I mean, it's just, some people are just so courageous, and it's something I really admire. I would like to aspire to be, but I feel like if you're a security cat, you are. Like, you know, you have to own it. I'm a flight person. That's not going to change. But I do admire that trait in others.
So what's the character trait in yourself that you're most proud of and why?
I think it's grit. We talked a little bit about college and things like that. I didn't go to college. I mean, I literally started at Moda at 19. I went to Indiana University for a minute. I was really homesick and I just couldn't do it. And so I feel like grit is something for me, like I'm gonna figure it out. I'm a smart person, I can Google this, you know, I can talk to someone, I will get there. And I feel like grit's probably the one thing I'm probably the most proud of.
Okay, so you can answer the next one first.
Okay.
What is the number one, what do you think is the number one misconception about this industry and why?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. It's really like what insurance companies do with premiums. Yeah, I really feel like that's a misconception. I feel like they're like, if you're like, actually, like there's this thing called the MLR. Like every dollar, 80% of that dollar is 80 cents has to go to pay premiums. 20 cents is left over. If you were in the, you know, the minority that isn't even making an 80% loss ratio, 20 cents is going to pay your overhead and your technology investments and everything else. And the reality is, most carriers aren't making an 80% loss ratio. And so I feel like it's one of these huge misconceptions about what happens to my premium dollar. Where does it go?
Well, I feel like we're kind of playing Family Feud, we're just turning over one of the tiles, so anything in that top 10 list, so Sally, anything you think of that would?
There are some. I would say that we don't care. You know, you think of it as health insurance, and I think that you even, you know, in the media and even in some movies when I was younger, they'd say those HMOs. I know customer service reps who, you know, they cry at the end of the day because we hear some pretty horrible stories.
Yeah.
I've gone to meetings where people come up and they share things and they show me rashes and things, and I'm like, I'm not a doctor. But, and I feel for them, you know, we take it home with us, and it is hard on us. I see that it's hard on our customer service reps and the people that are, you know, on the front line. And so I say the thought that we're just, you know, taking their premiums and paying their claims, and it's just a cog in the wheel.
No.
I think it's that we don't care, and that we actually care very deeply.
I think it's what is coinsurance. I'm not kidding. I spent 37 years of my life trying to explain to people what coinsurance is, and how the deductible and the coinsurance and the maximum out-of-pocket work. And to this day, I mean, I literally have charts that I've made, like giant poster boards that I take into meetings, and I'm like, here's your deductible. You can get a gift card if you can tell me how this works. I still to this day, I think that it is, as an industry, we've made it a little overly complicated for the average consumer. And so I just had to throw that one out there because it is frustrating. All right, let's see. What is next?
I think Sally's.
It's Sally's next, and this is one of my favorite ones.
Okay.
She's ready. What is your secret talent or something people would be surprised to learn about?
Oh, I already shared the cooking one. My daughter calls me the orchid whisperer. I have orchids that I've had for 10, 15 years, and I get them to rebloom all the time. Now, don't ask me what other plants can do, but orchids I can get to rebloom, and my daughter says it's my secret power.
That's a pretty spectacular one.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any.
You got something.
Secret or otherwise. But I would say something that people are surprised about, and that's, you know, people that don't know me very well. Obviously, one, I don't like sports ball, but two is I grew up riding motorcycles before I could ride a bike, and my family has a really it's a family business. It's in Washington, it's beautiful. And so I grew up, at a young age, working at the motocross track. And it's, working with people, customer service, working with money and trying to do the exchange. And I think it's interesting, because I think there's just not a lot of those types of skills that are really taught in school. You just don't see it as much, but I have to say, it's something people don't know about me. I don't think I have any secret talents, but
I like it.
that's all I got.
All right, last question. This one's not as hard.
Thank you.
Who is the one person, they could be famous, not famous, dead or alive, that you would most like to sit down, have a glass of Chardonnay with, have a coffee, a bagel, and have a discussion with them?
It's so hard, there's so many. Besides, I lost some family members. I would love to spend even just 5 minutes with some of them, but for work, I think Walt Disney. I think it's one, I love the imagination, I love the courage. I mean, I think I read somewhere that he was told no 300 times before the idea of Disneyland came to be. Like, he could get the funding for Disneyland 300 times. I was like, I probably would try 3 times. I probably, from 2 to $2.99. He did not give up. And I think that's amazing. I think that approach to business, that courage, that the imagination, how things can come into play, knowing your audience. I think those are things that I would really appreciate and learn from in business today.
Love it. Sally?
I think I'm gonna go, did you ask business? I thought you said just.
No, just anything.
Okay, no, I think I am gonna go personal, cause I didn't grow up with a lot of family. I think it's why I'm kind of adaptable. I moved around a lot, and I look back and I really wish I would spend more time with my grandmother, and heard the stories. Like, I knew she was in the military, and she helped build planes, and and at the time I was like, oh yeah, whatever. But now that I think about it, I'm like, I really wish I'd asked her, what made you leave Utah and go to New York and join the military and work on planes and things like that, so that I could pass that information and just absorb it and just kind of get to know who she was, but pass it on to my family and just tell them who they came from.
I love it. Well, you guys have been amazing guests on the live version.